statistical, mathematical fact
never has been down.
has broken every single record. There is no asset that has come close.
It's the only thing in the industry that was not touched, that was not hacked, and it never fails doing what it promised in 2009. It's never
What's
failed.
the best performing asset the world has ever seen? And you'll find out that it's Bitcoin.
Welcome, Bitcoiners. Welcome. Good evening. It's an evening for me in my particular location. So good evening for all of those who are in my time zone. Good afternoon, good morning for the rest of the world. Typically draw an international audience, which I like. So wherever you are in the world, welcome. Welcome to another live space with Oliver Velez. Of course, my name is Oliver Velez. And like I'm always telling you, I'm trying my very best to be your Bitcoiner for life. I want to be that voice in the wilderness, if it were, as it were, that voice that reminds you that we are extraordinarily fortunate. I believe that we are very fortunate just to be human beings. I'm not quite sure how many people really, truly grasp the rarity and how special it is to be a human being. The chances of being a human being is infinitesimally small. And so we, just by virtue of being human beings, we are scarce. We are, as far as the entire universe is concerned, we're scarce, we're special, we are rare. And I think that makes us extraordinarily fortunate. But we are even more fortunate today, in my opinion, than most human beings that have lived prior to us. And I believe that actually we are more fortunate than today. We are more fortunate than all other human beings that will be born after us. And the reason I believe that is because we happen to be human beings in this particular time, living during one of the greatest, what I believe will be and is the greatest period in human history. We are living and witnessing the virtual takeover of Bitcoin. We are living through the early stages of Bitcoin becoming not only, as its first use case, the base monetary layer of our entire system, our entire world. But I believe that we are living and witnessing something that is transitional in the human evolutionary journey or path. And I believe that we can't even at this particular time wrap our minds around all of what Bitcoin will ultimately be used for in the future. I believe that Bitcoin has started its journey as a monetary marvel, but I don't think it stops there. I think that it has, for one reason or another, chosen the monetary aspect as its first use case, its first area to conquer. But I believe that its virtues and its characteristics really lend itself to so many, many other things. And perhaps we, in this talk, can touch briefly upon a number of those things outside a monetary use case. But I want to be that voice that continues to remind you of how fortunate we are and how early we are. But I also want to be that voice that constantly is in your ear about the fact that our time is limited. So one can be early, but that period of being early, I don't believe in one respect will last very long. And so we're early, but our time is running out at the same time. And so anyway, welcome once again. For those of you who are not familiar with my spaces, I do want to let you know that I do not conduct spaces in which I pass the mic to you. So any requests to receive the mic will basically be for naught. I strongly continue to believe that the manner in which I deliver my information and the tiny bit of knowledge that I do have is best served by me giving you a monologue and you asking questions in response to that monologue throughout the monologue and after. I also want to let you know that each and every one of my live spaces here on X does wind up being a full recorded episode on my relatively new Bitcoin podcast called Bitcoin Unleashed. That can be found on Fountain app, where you can earn free Satoshis listening to the various episodes, not only from me, but from all podcasters. Also, you can find Bitcoin Unleashed on Spotify and soon on virtually every single other podcast medium of your choice. All right. Well, we're at a very interesting time in the year, guys. We're quickly coming upon the close of the year. As most of you who have been following me for any period of time, you know that I've been pounding the table on the fact that the latter part of the year is historically and traditionally very bullish for Bitcoin, or at least the Bitcoin USD denominated price. And that's certainly what we've experienced over the past 3 months, slightly more. And we're coming upon that close. I also believe that as far as the USD denominated price for Bitcoin, that we haven't even really started yet, despite the fact that Bitcoin is up over 187% off of its cycle low and over 165% year to date. I believe that that move that we've experienced off the low and throughout the year of 2023 hasn't really even started yet. Based on Bitcoin's cyclical history, that it is the year of the Bitcoin halving, which occurs in April of 2024, and more particular, the year after the halving that actually turns out to be the most bullish and exponential in terms of its USD denominated price. So for those of you who are into Bitcoin for just the number go up part of its technology, for lack of a better word, Bitcoin is far more than technology, but for lack of a better word, then I think the best is yet to come throughout the years up to 2024 and the full year, practically, of 2025. All right. So I want to welcome all of you. I usually here, I tend to draw relatively large crowds in all the mediums that I do live sessions in. This is probably my smallest, but it's the one that I enjoy the most. As I mentioned, these talks do get put out in other mediums that get slightly wider listeners, or wider group of listeners, and my team also takes some of the content that I share here with you and dice them and slice them into more digestible forms of information and knowledge and spread out over all other mediums. So anyway, I want to thank you for giving me your time today as we go into what I consider to be a really fun topic here today. I want to thank you for giving me your time. I'm always fond of saying that Bitcoin is extraordinarily rare and precious, but it is not more rare and it is not more precious than your time. Time is the stuff that life is made up of, and it is very finite, and it is that rarest of all commodities that you can never get back. You might be able to get Bitcoin back if you were to let it go, because we're so early. I don't believe that will be the case in the future, but right now it's still possible that you can get Bitcoin back after you let it go, if you were to let it go. But you can never get the time that you spend with me or the time you spend on anything back ever. It is gone forever. And because of that, I made a vow almost 3 decades ago when I started traveling the world in an attempt to spread the gospel of financial freedom. I've been traveling the world for 3 decades doing this. I now do it practically and almost exclusively for Bitcoin only. But I made a vow 3 decades ago that anyone, whether that's one person, 100 people, tens of thousands of people, for anyone who's willing to give me that rarest of all commodities, their time, I would do my absolute best to deliver something of value, something that I believe that will be worthy of you pondering, thinking about, maybe studying, and hopefully, and perhaps something that you can potentially utilize and benefit from throughout the rest of your entire life. I hope I accomplished that here today. And let's see. All right, guys. And please, any questions you have throughout, please feel free to ask any questions you like. There is no topic that, in my opinion, it is off limits here. So please. All right. So listen, the topic that I labeled our talk today, how altcoins, or what I commonly refer to as shitcoins, how altcoins help Bitcoin. Now, if you followed me for any period of time, you know my vitriol toward these alternative coins. I believe that the vast majority of them, if not all of them, are nothing more than VC or venture capitalist funded pump and dump schemes that are designed to make a quick buck off of ignorance and off of off of a window of opportunity to ride the coattails of Bitcoin. These altcoins are utilizing the catchy terms such as blockchain technology and cryptocurrency and digital assets, and they dice it with other very marketing charged terms such as DeFi and CeFi and things of that nature. But for the most part, when you strip the covers back or you lift the curtain and look deep enough, you really find the same 4 to 5 major players who are behind the vast majority of these false narratives that have no use case whatsoever, that they are the same companies that did the same thing in other industries before anyone ever even heard the term blockchain or cryptocurrency. These are the same firms that I have been exposed to over my 40-year career in the traditional finance industry that have done the same thing in the penny stock realm, that have done the same thing in the online gambling realm. These players that are behind the vast majority of these altcoins pitched to the public are the same players that have been playing the same playbook for decades. And they don't fool me. They fool tens of millions of people, but they certainly don't fool me. Now, I will say this before I delve into what I want to talk to you about today. I will say that I did shitcoin in the beginning, like most people. And to be very honest with you, I made a tremendous amount of money shitcoining. I never lost ever on a shitcoin. I never lost from a monetary perspective on an altcoin. In fact, I made a lot. But when I had my epiphany, as far as Bitcoin is concerned, meaning that when I made that transition and realized that Bitcoin was more than something to buy for $1 and sell it for $2, that it was more than just another asset to gain more of the fiat currency that we dedicate our lives to. When that epiphany hit me, when that realization dawned on me, I dropped altcoins like a hot potato. And that's not easy to do if you've made millions in a particular space or doing a specific activity. But it became a principle to me. And I vowed that I would do my best to point all of the all that is wrong with altcoins out, as long as I had breath in my body. Now, I will say that with all of that being said, in my vitriol, and with all of my vitriol for these pump and dump schemes we call altcoins or shitcoins, I will say that there is, in my opinion, a benefit to Bitcoin. That yes, altcoins in some weird way, they do help Bitcoin in a way. It's not that Bitcoin, in my opinion, needs their help. It's just that by virtue of them existing at this particular point in time, they do lend some form of help to Bitcoin. And there are three specific ways I want to talk to you about in which I believe that they do help Bitcoin. So let's delve into those three things right now. How do altcoins, according to Oliver Velez, actually do help Bitcoin? Number one, they serve as the inferior to prove what is superior. I'm going to repeat that. Reason number one, I believe that altcoins help Bitcoin, is that they are the inferior and they serve as a glaring example of what is inferior so that you can, or the world can, see more clearly what is superior. You see, traders, in order to determine whether something is superior, you must have the inferior to judge it against. And if you don't have the inferior to determine what is superior, then how will you ever know what is superior? Altcoins are inferior to Bitcoin in every particular way. Bitcoin is the immaculate conception. There will never be another. Bitcoin is a discovery. You can't discover something twice. It is not an invention. It is actually beyond an innovation. It is a discovery like that of the number zero. All right. It is a discovery such as electricity. It is a discovery such as the atom. These things existed long before. These things existed since the beginning of time. They were not known nor had not been discovered since the beginning of time, but that did not mean they existed. Bitcoin is the manifestation of something, in my opinion, that has existed since the beginning of time: digital scarcity. The digital world or space that we live in is not new. It is not created. It is not a man-made item or a man-made realm, no more than the atomic world was a world discovered, a world created. The atomic realm of life existed from the beginning of time. It was discovered by human beings not so long ago. But I believe that the digital realm, which we are becoming as human beings more and more comfortable living in and dealing with, this existed. The internet made the digital realm discoverable for us. Bitcoin came into existence to reveal the fact that scarcity actually does exist in this realm that has always existed, but that we've discovered only ever so recently. But my point here is that altcoins are inferior. There have been 60,000 plus altcoins that have come into existence, which are nothing more than very poor carbon copies of Bitcoin. They have all failed. Not a single one is finished. They're nothing more than a list of bullet pointed bullet-pointed promises that have never come to fruition. They are almost entirely backed by venture capitalists, or what I call the vulture capitalists. They are all largely owned, directed, manipulated, and controlled by a small group of men. And they are camouflaged with terms such as blockchain and decentralized finance. And they are driven by marketing themes such as world computer and ultrasound money and so forth and so on. But you need the inferior in order to see what is superior. And in this way, I believe that they serve a purpose. They serve a purpose to eventually, for everyone to ultimately see, well, there are 60,000 attempts at something to be better than this, and they've all failed. Nothing has come close yet. How many more do we really need to see? 100,000? 2 million? I mean, at what point is enough enough? And superiority is basically known. And so the inferior is necessary to know what the superior is. And before I leave this point number one, I do want to tell you a quick story. I'll try to keep it short. There was a time before the internet became ubiquitous in my industry, in the financial trading industry, the trading space. I had trading offices in various parts of the world. I had offices in Tokyo, Japan, that housed traders in that part of the world. I had an office in Munich, Germany. I had offices for periods of time in Paris and London, of course, throughout the United States, 2 in Canada. And I had one specific office, a relatively small office, that became a very powerful force in Caracas, Venezuela. Now, we're talking the late 1990s, all right, 1998, 1999, into 2000. And I mentioned this small but very powerful trading office in Caracas, Venezuela, for a reason. I met an individual who wanted to invest in my operation in Venezuela. We had become a force to be reckoned with there. And he wanted to find some way to get into my operation, to be somewhat of an equity owner in that division. He had these grandiose plans of taking my trading concept for Venezuela throughout all of Latin America, and yada, yada, yada. This individual, and I will not mention his name for just for privacy's sake, but he was one of the wealthiest individuals at that particular time in Venezuela. And he taught me a very valuable lesson. Now, I hope I don't give him away too much. This individual owned the largest, or was one of the owners of the largest beer companies in Venezuela at the time. And I remember when he told me the story of how his second competitor, his number one competitor, was the number 2 branded beer in Venezuela. And they started to fall on tough times. He was the number one. He was the number one beer company. The second beer company in the country began to have financial difficulties. And he made the decision, he told me, to bail them out, to actually keep them alive. And it was something that I did not understand. Like, why, I asked him, would you bail out your competitor? This competitor actually wants you to die. This competitor wants to move from number 2 to being number 1. this competitor in your situation would let you die, why are you bailing out number two when by allowing them to die, you clearly won? And he turned to me, and I never forgot this lesson. I never forgot what he said. He said, Oliver, how can I ever claim to be number one and have that mean something if there is no number two? And boom, I got it instantly. You need number two to actually be able to say without a doubt that I am number one, and have that mean something. You see, anyone can claim to have or be the number one, but if there is nothing else there to compete with you, if there is nothing else there to compare with you, then you're saying that you're number one. It might be true, but it doesn't mean as much. It doesn't mean anything that if you're the only one there, if you're the only one left, if you're the only one that exists. And I never forgot that lesson. Oliver, how can I claim to be number one when it means something if there is no number two? I had to keep them alive to be able to constantly say, I'm number one, and have that mean something to the world. And so in this fashion, Bitcoin continues to be number one. And it is through the comparison of Bitcoin with all of this shit out there. It is through the comparison of Bitcoin against every single other copy that claims to be better tech, that claims to be newer tech, that claims to be more innovative, that claims to be faster, more efficient, use less energy, all of that BS. Despite what they claim, you can literally go from metric to metric to metric to metric. Not second place is so far behind that it can't even see Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has lapped second place multiple times. And so altcoins help Bitcoin in this regard. They serve as the inferior to prove that Bitcoin is superior. All right. What's the second reason that altcoins help? What's the second way, I should say, not reason, the second way that altcoins help Bitcoin? They serve, in some regard, as a testing ground, a beta system, if you will, for anything that might have some merit, anything that might have some valid use case. They serve as a testing ground for Bitcoin to be able to add that item to its functionality in the future. So instead of Bitcoin needing to run these tests or to jeopardize its own security to see if this works or that works, it almost in a way allows these other idiots to flop around and see if there is some little small thing, some measure of benefit that Bitcoin at this particular time does not necessarily allow, but can for the future. They serve as a beta system for Bitcoin. Now, we don't need to look any further than, let's say, the NFT space, okay? The non-fungible token space. And this NFTs were one of the larger, if not one of the largest driving forces for shitcoins or altcoins in particular during the last bull cycle of the cryptocurrency space. It was probably responsible for that, along with the DeFi and CeFi, were largely responsible for the better part of this shitcoin valuation surge during the last bull cycle. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the first NFT, if I'm not mistaken, was accomplished or done on Bitcoin many, many years ago, or not, I can't say many years ago, but years ago. So Bitcoin NFTs aren't new as far as Bitcoin. It's just that the Ethereum protocol really took the NFT craze to what one might consider to be big heights. Now, this has proven to be something that, for whatever reason, people do consider to have some value, to have some use case, digital art, or immortalizing a JPEG, or what have you. It's not my particular thing, but there are a lot of things that aren't my particular thing. Who am I to say what's valuable to another person, what's valuable to you? And so what this craze did was really uncover the fact that this is likely to have some staying power, that humans somehow want this. And so through the Taproot upgrade in Bitcoin has almost entirely assumed that for itself. It allowed the shitcoin space to reveal that this has some lasting merit. And now there is more NFT activity on Bitcoin than virtually any other protocol that exists out there. And I believe that is never, ever going to change again. Now, it's not called NFTs. They're called ordinals and inscriptions. And through the relatively new Taproot upgrade that took place in, I believe, the latter part of 2022, if I'm not mistaken. Ordinals and inscriptions were able to basically come into existence with greater efficiency on the Bitcoin network. Now, this might take us delving a tiny bit into the Taproot upgrade that accomplished some really important things for the Bitcoin protocol. So let me do that really fast here. The Taproot upgrade was a major improvement to the Bitcoin network because it primarily enables more efficient, secure, and private transactions to take place on the network. Now, I'm always telling people that Bitcoin is not perfect, but you don't want it to be perfect. And this is a very important point to understand, because I come in contact with, especially here on X, I come in contact with a lot of people who, with their buts, their what ifs and whys regarding Bitcoin, because why doesn't Bitcoin do this yet? And when will it do that? And it's not great at this. And I'm like, well, yes, you don't want it to be yet, because opportunity exists in something before it reaches the point where it is near perfect. You don't want to wait for something to become perfect. You don't want to wait for something to have all of its I's dotted and all of its T's crossed and then get into it. That's entirely too late. You don't want to bet on the next superstar, the next Michael Jordan, when he's obviously Michael Jordan at 32 years old. You want to grab the Michael Jordan at 9 years old, at 11 years old, at 12 years old, and in Bitcoin's case, at 15 years old. And so Bitcoin will become more and more of the things that it is not yet. It is not as private, for instance, as Monero, but it will be. You see, it is not as efficient, but it will be. And we're catching it early. But what the Taproot upgrade did was enable more efficient, secure, and private transactions to take place. Now, one of the features of the Taproot upgrade was the integration of what's called Schnorr signatures. Now, Schnorr signatures, they allow multiple signatures to be aggregated into a single one. This was not capable before the Taproot upgrade. Now, what this does, it reduced the size and the cost of transactions and also enabled the privacy of the participants, or greater privacy for the participants. Ordinals and inscriptions are two applications that leverage that upgrade from Taproot to create new possibilities for the Bitcoin network. Now, some people might not know what the difference is between an ordinal and an inscription. Let me quickly touch upon that now. Now, ordinals they're sort of like unique numbers that are assigned to each single Satoshi. So Satoshi is the smallest unit of Bitcoin on the blockchain. Now, ordinals, they allow users to track and verify the history and ownership of an individual Satoshi. So one full Bitcoin is made up of 100 million Satoshis. Through this upgrade, what ordinals allows you to do is basically assign a number to one of those very, very small, infinitesimally small units of Bitcoin right now. All right. And they allow you to track the history of an ownership of an individual Satoshi. And you can inscribe data on these individual Satoshis as well. Now, inscriptions, all right, there's ordinals, and now inscriptions are the process of embedding data on ordinals, such as messages, images, code, or any other form of information for that matter. Inscriptions can be used for various purposes, such as digital art, proof of existence of something, identity verification, and of course, smart contracts. Now, when you mention the term smart contracts, what a lot of people in the shitcoin space point to as Ethereum, they believe that Ethereum is the smart contract protocol, when in fact, the first smart contracts to ever existed on Bitcoin. But because of the popularity of these smart contracts and these NFTs, which have now taken largely the form of ordinals and inscriptions on Bitcoin, they blew up on Ethereum to a certain point, and other protocols to the certain point where it's a thing of value. People want it. Okay. Bitcoin, through the Taproot upgrade, assumed that, and there now is more activity regarding NFT-like movement and activity on Bitcoin than any other protocol in the world right now. All right. Now, all of this was made possible by the Taproot upgrade, which allows users to create complex transactions that can encode data on the blockchain without revealing the details of the transaction to the public. And so my point in explaining to you all of this is how Bitcoin is capable of bringing something onto itself that has already been proven to be valuable to the human species in one way or another. It's not impossible for it to do. It's just that the Bitcoin protocol has placed virtually up until now all of its focus, all of its attention on the things that matter the most for sound money. It has decided to focus on what matters most for saving humanity, for removing the modern form of slavery that is imposed on the human race today. It is focused entirely up until now on security, becoming the most secure network the world has ever seen. And it is focused almost entirely up until this point on being a decentralized protocol. that gives it a form of invincibility. You can always attack and kill something if it's centralized, but it becomes virtually invincible and something that you can't attack if it is almost entirely decentralized. If there is no neck to choke or throat to choke, if there is no choking point, if there is no CEO, if there is no foundation that runs it, if there is no group of managers that make the decisions for it, if there is no physical location where it resides, if there is no corporate headquarters, if there's no president, if there's no leader, you cannot attack it. And in this respect, a decentralized protocol is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And these were far more important things to accomplish than speed. All right. A lot of the shitcoin space talks about how slow the transactions of Bitcoin on the base layer are. They conveniently don't mention the speed with which transactions take place on the second layer, called the Lightning Network. But on the base layer, they sort of poke fun at the fact that on average, it takes 7 seconds to transact on the Bitcoin base layer. And they, from a marketing perspective, build their protocol to be faster than 7 seconds and claim that they're better. But speed is not as important as is not more important than decentralization, because speed on a centralized protocol can be taken down. Speed is not as important as being 100% secure. What benefit is there to be able to transact quickly on an insecure protocol where there are hacks almost by the hour and lost funds at enormous value amounts? And so, because Bitcoin chose the most important things that are associated with sound money, it left the other things for a later time. Rome is never built in a day, nor do you want it to be built in a day. All right. And so, altcoins have helped or can help and have helped Bitcoin in this regard. All right. They've served as a testing ground. Litecoin is virtually a carbon copy of Bitcoin. It is less secure than Bitcoin, of course. It is less decentralized than Bitcoin. It sacrificed those things for slightly more speed. Because that shitcoin called Litecoin is so similar to the code of Bitcoin, is literally the copy of Bitcoin with a few lines of code changed. All right. A lot of your Bitcoin developers actually run the tests for things to determine the validity of their code on the shitcoin protocol called Litecoin. Because if it breaks there, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't work there, it doesn't matter. So this shitcoin called Litecoin, this altcoin called Litecoin, is literally Bitcoin devs' testing ground. It's the solution for nothing. It has solved absolutely nothing for human mankind, for society at large, but it does serve in some way as the cheap little beta tester for Bitcoin before you even attempt to try it on the base layer protocol of Bitcoin itself. And so, number one, how do altcoins help Bitcoin? They serve as the inferior to prove what the superior is. And number two, they serve as a beta. They serve as a testing ground of sorts to determine what of value can be added to the Bitcoin protocol itself. And I'll just say this. If something on another alternative BS protocol proves to have something of merit, if and when Bitcoin does assume that, who else in their right mind would ever choose the alternative? No one. If NFTs are brought to Bitcoin, and they are, why would you choose to do NFTs anywhere else? Because nothing else is more secure than Bitcoin. Nothing else is as immutable as Bitcoin. Nothing else is as secure as Bitcoin. And nothing else is more valuable than Bitcoin. Nothing else is more known and ubiquitous than Bitcoin. But why would you choose the inferior over the superior? Very few people will do that. And so Bitcoin ultimately, if it consumes it, if it takes it, if it adopts it, it's Bitcoin's forever. Forever. I just saw recently that in a recent block on the mempool, on Bitcoin's mempool, the mempool, for those of you who are not familiar with this, is sort of like a waiting room for transactions to be verified and processed on the Bitcoin blockchain. So they're like little rooms that unverified transactions are waiting to be verified and processed, right? That's the mempool. So they're waiting rooms. These blocks are waiting. And I checked on the mempool recently and saw that each block rewards the miner who solves the mathematical equation, for lack of a better phrase, right? Rewards the miner 6.25 Bitcoin per block. That's what Bitcoin pays miners to defend it, to work for it. 6.25 Bitcoin per block. Now, blocks are processed on the Bitcoin protocol on average about every 10 minutes. In April of 2024, that reward will drop to 3.125. It gets halved. Now, what a lot of the altcoiners or shitcoiners who really are the enemy of Bitcoin, they have always claimed that Bitcoin's security is threatened in the future because as the reward to pay miners to defend it gets less and less, miners are less incentivized to work for Bitcoin, to defend Bitcoin, to provide the security for Bitcoin, because the miners are, in a way, the army of Bitcoin. Bitcoin pays its army, very much like the United States pays its military to defend and protect the country. The Bitcoin pays its military, its armies, the miners, to work for, defend, and protect the network. And so with a declining reward from 6.25 to 3.125, and later to 1.5 and change, and so forth and so on, that this declining reward is a threat to the Bitcoin security or the Bitcoin military or the Bitcoin defense mechanism in the future. And the shitcoiners love to jump on that narrative. Well, in a recent block poll, the fees that miners get in addition to the block reward of 6.25 matched the block reward. So think of the miners being paid in two forms. They get paid Bitcoin right now, 6.25 Bitcoin every single block that is produced, every single new block, every 10 minutes, 6.25, 6.25 Bitcoin is the reward. But they also get paid, miners get paid by fees processing the transactions. So a miner is rewarded in two ways: Bitcoin from the network and fees from the users. Okay. The fees in this, and I'll do my best to include this in the show notes. The fees matched the Bitcoin reward. So the miners in this particular block got paid 6.25 Bitcoin, 6.25 times 42,200. All right. Plus 6.25 Bitcoin worth of fees. So the fees match the reward. And so why is this the case? Largely because of ordinals and inscriptions today. That the activity for this new excitement on the Bitcoin blockchain has mushroomed fees. Now, there are pluses and minuses to that, but this was an inevitability that fees on the base layer of Bitcoin have always been known to, at some point, start rising in the future, because block space is as scarce as Bitcoin itself, and its simple supply and demand dynamics. The more demand for space, as space is limited, the higher the fees are going to be to actually secure a piece of that limited space. And so what ordinals and inscriptions have only done is sped that up a bit. But my point is that this is happening largely because the Taproot upgrade has allowed all of this NFT activity that took place on the shitcoin protocols, to basically come over to a more secure network, a more decentralized network, a more immutable network, a more global network, a bigger network, a better protocol all the way around, and house themselves there. Now, for one, there is a huge debate going on in the Bitcoin community whether or not these things are an attack on Bitcoin, ordinals and inscriptions, whether they are used for nefarious reasons, whether they're a benefit. I don't really, in all honesty, know enough about the technical goings on to really comment in that regard. But I do fall more on the side that, who am I to tell you what is valuable and what is not? Who am I to tell you how you want to use Bitcoin? Bitcoin is an open source protocol for the world. It does not demand that you use it. It makes itself available to every human being on earth. It provides no rules by which you are to use it or not use it for the most part. Well, it does provide rules, but it does not give instructions as to what's good, what's bad. It's open. And so I fall more in the camp that if you want to use the protocol this way, knock yourself out. That supply and demand dynamics will ultimately work things out in the end. But that is also, admittedly, somewhat of a one-dimensional view on my part, because I am not sophisticated enough to know the technical goings on behind this. But that is where I fall on this debate, with the limited amount of knowledge and information that I have. All right. And the last item I need to get to before I let you go of how altcoins can help Bitcoin is that they serve, these shitcoins, these altcoins, they serve as a cover for Bitcoin. They serve as camouflage in a way. They do this by allowing, or they have allowed, these shitcoins, these altcoins have allowed Bitcoin to operate somewhat under the radar of regulatory capture and scrutiny and political attack. You see, Most of what the naysayers have to say about Bitcoin is really more applicable to the shitcoin space, to the altcoin arena. Almost everything that is negatively said has some truth to it regarding this space. But what is not made clear is that there's Bitcoin and then there's everything else. And so when you talk about it's used as, largely by criminals, and they're mostly scams, and they're mostly rug pulls, and they're mostly pump and dump schemes. They're mostly decentralized in name and very closely held by a small group of people. That they are insecure and they're unregistered securities. All of these things are actually true. They're just not true for Bitcoin, but they're practically true for every single thing else. And so, in a sense, Bitcoin has been allowed to tick-tock next block without a great deal of bother because, let me take a sip of coffee here, guys. Because especially in recent years, the focus has been on all of these other nonsense protocols that are disguising themselves as something of value. I can't remember the number, but it's definitely approaching $1 trillion in value through scams, hacks, and rug pulls in the shitcoin space. Think about that. Bitcoin's value today is about, at last check, $824 billion in US dollar denominated terms. There has been as much as 800 billion in rug pulls. There's never been a rug pull on Bitcoin. Dev scams, developer scams, hacks, protocol outages and failures, fraud, criminal activity. There has been just as much value as as the most valuable network in the history of the world. Bitcoin is the most valuable network in the history of the world. There's been just as much value lost in the shitcoin space. And because of that, there is a great deal of scrutiny on them. And this scrutiny is causing the world to gradually see, well, Bitcoin is different. Bitcoin doesn't have developer scams on it. Bitcoin is not funded by venture capitalist funds. Bitcoin doesn't have an ICO where they raised money. Bitcoin doesn't have a pre-mine that goes to a small group of insiders that just gradually dump on the new people coming in. Bitcoin doesn't have frauds by the insiders. There are no insiders. Bitcoin doesn't have a foundation like all of these other things have. Bitcoin doesn't have a bully pulpit. Bitcoin doesn't have a leader that determines the future path of the protocol and determines what's going to be the future. And so all of this is helping the world to draw a line of demarcation between Bitcoin and everything else. Because prior, it was all being mixed up that no one really, who didn't give it some time to study and investigate, no one really truly got, what do you mean Bitcoin is different? But that narrative is now becoming clearer and clearer to a larger and larger portion of the world that there's Bitcoin and everything else, that there is regulatory clarity with Bitcoin and there's not regulatory clarity with anything else, that everything that the politicians and the naysayers and the haters write about, speak about, is true, but it's not true for Bitcoin. It's just true for everything else. And so this kind of ties into point number one, that they serve as a differentiator, as a differentiating force. They're so bad that it clearly shows how pristine Bitcoin truly is. And it's in these ways, this is how they sort of help Bitcoin. And I'll quickly summarize. Number one, the altcoins help Bitcoin because they serve as the inferior to prove and show beyond a shadow of a doubt what is superior. Number two, they serve as a beta ground, a testing ground, if you will, so that Bitcoin doesn't have to risk its protocol to test certain things out. And they also serve as a cover for Bitcoin, a camouflage, if you will, that has allowed, especially in the past, Bitcoin to operate outside of the attack force of regulators and politicians and so forth and so on. Now, of course, while this is not the topic of my talk here today, there are a slew of negatives regarding these false narratives that form themselves in the form of an alternative coin. I'm always telling people, why, if you have number one, why would you ever want an alternative to number one? Like, I was just never that way. I operated my life largely on a first class first philosophy, if you will. All right. I always wanted first class. I always wanted the first. I want the best. I wanted the top. I didn't want to say, well, I can get the top and I can get the alternative to the top. Why would you want the alternative to the top? Why would you want the alternative to number one when you do have access to number one? It's different if you don't have access to it. It's different if you're like, you know what? I can't afford first class to Dubai, but I can afford coach to Dubai. All right, that's different. But if you have access to first class flights to Dubai, and you also have access to the shitty seats in the back of the plane, why would you ever choose the shitty seats? I don't get that. Why would you choose the alternative to first when you have access to first? And this is something I just never understand. I don't want the freaking alternative to anything. Do you understand? If I can't get first, then I'm not getting it. Maybe I'll work harder until I can get it. But don't give me number two. Don't give me number three. Certainly don't give me number five. I'm just wired that way. And it baffles me why more and more people aren't wired that way. They insist on living second class and third class lives, especially when it comes to this, because you have access to the best. You have access to the superior. You have access to the winner. Bitcoin has already won. There is no catching it, and there is no duplicating it. People make the mistake of looking at Bitcoin like it's the Bitcoin as if it's just another company in a space. That is an ignorant error, and it is going to cost people their futures and maybe even their lives. It's a very big mistake to think that electricity is a company, and that there are going to be alternative electricities, and I'm waiting for another alternative to be better than electricity. Oh, wait a minute, I'm waiting for another internet to come up. I'm not going to partake in this internet that we have today. It clearly has taken over the world, I know, but I'm going to sit and not participate and wait for an alternative internet to come into our lives. Are you serious? Like, it's 15 years already. Get over it. It ain't happening. But the negatives of these things existing are extraordinarily clear. I mean, I've already mentioned some of these. I mean, the scams are just, they're prolific. And the amount of lost wealth is stupefying. The fraud. It's not by chance that every fraudster was a shitcoiner in the space. That should not be lost on you, that every single fraudster was a shitcoiner, was an altcoiner. Every single fraudster did not like Bitcoin. Why? Why did they not like it? Because they can't control it. They can't manipulate it. They can't dump it on you. They can't scam with it. Scams are a negative of these things existing. It takes less than 30 minutes to spin up a coin. If you've got enough marketing prowess, hire a few market makers for the coins, and you can manipulate the price. You can pay people to write positive articles about it as you make the price of this thinly floated coin look like it's outperforming Bitcoin, when in fact it's your paid market makers and your paid over-the-counter desks, OTC desks, to help support certain price levels to make it a straight line up, so that now you can pay the writers of articles, they're all for sale, to write glowing articles about how this is the new technology. Look at how it's outperforming Bitcoin, when in fact you control 70 to 90% of the float, which means that only a small amount of the float is out there, which makes it very easily manipulated. And you can manipulate this beautiful chart. I know this game. I've been in the financial space and have seen this played out over and over and over again in the shitcoin space of equities, called the micro caps or the small caps. It's the same playbook, just applied to the cryptocurrency space. It's not new. Nothing about it is new. So now the negative is the confusion. The average Joe on the street doesn't have the time or the inclination to do some study, to put in the work to determine what's different between Bitcoin and every other scam out there. And so they get lulled into this by all the paid for marketing. These guys know what they're doing. They've done it for decades. If you were to look behind who is really the insiders behind most of these scams called altcoins, you'll see the same 4 to 5 firms pop up every single time. They're just playing the repeat playbook, one at a time, sometimes more than one at a time. Despite JP Morgan is run by Jamie Dimon. Most people know that Jamie Dimon has been an outspoken critic of Bitcoin. In fact, he blankets the whole entire space as being nothing more than a scam. But in particular, he attacks Bitcoin, failing to mention to the public that JP Morgan is behind more shitcoinery in the space than almost any other major financial firm in existence today. Most people don't realize, and nor will Jamie Dimon openly and publicly tell you, that JP Morgan is one of the original and one of the largest initial investors in the Ethereum ICO. No wonder he's an outspoken critic of Bitcoin. They're one of the key insiders of Ethereum. And so all of these shenanigans, all of this shitcoinery is all just smoke and mirrors to keep the vast majority of the public away from the item that truly frees them from all of that. No one who's participating in that wants you free from that. How are they going to benefit? You can't scam on Bitcoin, so they attack Bitcoin. You can't rug pull on Bitcoin. The developers have no control over the protocol, so they can't defraud you like they've done on every single other protocol. They have no control. The developers have almost total control over every other alternative. So they can't be developer scams on Bitcoin. You can't defraud someone on Bitcoin. It's an open protocol that is fully decentralized. It can't be manipulated and changed to benefit you. Every other one can. Its monetary policy is set in stone. No other monetary policy on an alternative is set in stone. There is no individual that can be influenced on Bitcoin, but there's an individual tied to, or a group of individuals tied to every other single alternative that can be influenced, bought, manipulated, controlled, incentivized to do this, that. They can change things on you, or they can walk away with all of your money. So this confusion does do damage. These scams do damage. The loss of wealth and value does have a spillover effect onto Bitcoin because the average Joe can't or refuses to, or does not have the inclination for doing the research and the investigation enough to see that everything that they don't like about this is not part of Bitcoin, that it's part of the entire scamming industry that's risen up around Bitcoin to ride Bitcoin's tailcoats as long as possible. So in this regard, another negative is that it slows the adoption of freedom technology. It slows down individuals becoming free from all of what they don't want, free from financial slavery, free from debasement, free from being inflated away, the value being inflated away, free from theft, free from hacks, free from scams, free from rug pulls, free from development frauds by developers. Bitcoin is free from all of that. And it slows their ability to gain that freedom. It's an incalculable sin as far as I'm concerned. And I won't participate in it. People ask me all the time, Oliver, we made, and these are mostly my traders, because we made a tremendous amount of money off these things. Why are we no longer playing them anymore? And it's because I won't even give them the benefit of a single solitary, dirty piece of fiat currency from me. I don't want to help it in any way because I see it for what it is. I don't want to contribute in any way. I know I can make money from it, but there are more important things than that. And so I refuse to participate in it. And as long as I have a breath in my body, I will speak out against it. What kind of individual would I be if I didn't? What would that say about me if I knew that for every person who wins with this garbage, there are millions that lose their lives? For every one that you can write an article about how their life was changed by shitcoining. There are tens of millions who will never recover. And knowing that, how can I participate? Knowing that better than most because I'm in the industry. What kind of person would I be if I didn't speak out against that? What kind of person would I be? Well, I'm in it for the money. There are things that pay that you still should not participate in. I could sell freaking crack cocaine and make more money than most people. Does that mean I should do it? My father used to say, Oliver, every dollar in the world is not yours, son. Stop chasing everything that crosses your path. Dig in, decide on something, and stick with it. There are a certain number of dollars in the world that have Oliver Velez on it. Focus on those. Don't get distracted by all the dollars floating around in the world. You'll get nowhere, Oliver. Oliver, every dollar's not yours. Choose which ones are yours. And that is what I'm doing. I can make dollars over there, but those dollars I no longer regard as mine. They're dirty. I don't want to have anything. I don't want to have anything to do with them. I can make money selling hot cars. Is that what I should do? No. So I'm not going to do it. And I'm hoping that I'm going to convince, I don't care if I have to do it one by one, more and more people to adopt that view and that attitude as well. All right, guys, that's all I wanted to talk to you about today. It's how altcoins, as scammy as they are, how they have had some benefits for Bitcoin. Now, I know we're operating in somewhat vacation time and it's weekend time. Even during a week, I get very few questions. I'm pretty sure there are very few here. But let me just see. I do have one from Z Nakamoto saying, Oliver, you say to get our Bitcoin off exchanges, but if it's a small amount like 0.005, should I still take it off? Yes, you should. And I can't say that's a resounding yes. I do believe that, especially in a growing fee environment for the Bitcoin-based layer, you have to be careful of the size of your UTXOs, your unspent transaction outputs. So you don't want to transfer extraordinarily small amounts because they have a higher chance in a rising fee environment to become what's called operated dust, which means that the value of your small amount of Bitcoin is lower than the cost to move it. And so if it costs you $10 to move your Bitcoin and you're moving $5, the fee is bigger than the cost of the Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin is basically useless, right? So you want to make sure that these little tiny micro amounts, you're very careful with them. And that's a whole different topic, UTXO management, which I think is increasingly going to become more and more important to understand. But there are two forms of self-custody for, I'm going to oversimplify this a bit. Well, there are three forms in a way, but the two main forms of self-custody or storage can be done through hot wallets and cold wallets. And that's what I should say. There are largely two types of wallets, right? In small amounts, I find it okay pulling your Bitcoin off exchange into a hot wallet. And they're getting better. Now, what's the difference between a hot wallet and a cold wallet? A hot wallet does have some access to the internet. And so it does theoretically increase the odds that you can get hacked or, if something is not connected to the internet, you reduce the possibility of being hacked by orders of magnitude for the most part. And so hot wallets are for holding amounts that are not going to be lost, life changing if you lose them, sort of like the pocket change that you carry around in the street, but not the vault money that is your life savings. And so if it's extraordinarily small, having a hot wallet such as Blockstream's Green Wallet, I think that the Green Wallet, which is in desktop form and in cell phone form, has done some amazing things for security. And even though it's a hot wallet, it made it pretty hard for you to get hacked with it. I find the same. I find some amazing things being done with foundations, um, Envoy hot wallet. So they have the Foundation Passport, uh, which is the cold storage device, the signing device, basically. Then they have the hot wallet that can be used as a standalone as well, not just in conjunction with your passport. It's called Envoy, their hot wallet, and they've done some really amazing work with that hot wallet to make it very, very secure. And so as long as you don't run the risk of your move being too little, you can start off with smaller amounts in a hot wallet, such as Blockstream's Green Wallet. You guys should look that up. It's called the Green Bitcoin Wallet by Blockstream. And the Envoy Bitcoin Wallet by Foundation. I would take a look at both of those. And once you have built up in those wallets, let's say, or those addresses that are managed or can be signed by those hot wallets, and they get to a certain amount, you do want to ultimately cold storage them. And as far as fees are concerned, you want to keep your finger on the pulse of fees. You can do that absolutely free. Bitcoin's an open protocol. I think it's mempool. I think it's mempool.org or mempool.com, but you can take a look at that. And just whenever you move, you want to make sure you're moving your Bitcoin in a relatively low fee environment. Fees don't stay, extraordinarily high all the time. They're like hills and valleys, right? So you want to do all of your UTXO management, and you're moving a Bitcoin when there is a dip in Bitcoin fees. You don't want to do it when there is a spike or a rise in Bitcoin fees. And so keeping your finger on the pulse of the mempool, and knowing where the fees are at the current moment can help you mitigate some of the higher fee the higher fee issue. In addition to that, what was I going to say? I think I lost my thought on this, but I hope that suffices. I hope that suffices for now. With that being said, if you are on a decent exchange, and as much as I almost hate to say it, like a Coinbase, where they're regulated by the SEC, publicly traded. There is some TradFi security in that, and building up on a Coinbase wallet or something like that, building up the size of your Bitcoin accumulations on a decent exchange before you move is acceptable as well. When I say get your Bitcoin off exchange, it is not instantly it's really for those who are holding decent amounts there unnecessarily. But if you really got small amounts, there's nothing wrong with spending some time building it there. And when it gets to an acceptable size, move over. Now, some people might say, well, Oliver, what's an acceptable size? That's changing. I used to recommend if you're moving less, you should not move less than 1 million Satoshis. But I would say you probably want to be higher now. And if you're going to something like 2 million Satoshis, you are getting up into, $500, $600. $700, $800. So building up to $500, $600 and then moving, I think is acceptable today, but that could change in the future. All right. This is also ties into me telling you that our time is limited, that what you're seeing is the window being closed on you. We're still early, but the window of easy movement and things in that, it's all closing on you. So get to it, guys, and stack harder. All right, guys, that's the only question I see. I want to thank you once again for joining me live. I don't know how many people are in here, though. Let me just quickly see. All right, a pretty decent crowd here. There's like 15 people here. I want to thank you for joining me. Again, I told you, I never take your time for granted. I hope I've shared something of value here today, something that you can think about, ponder, do some investigation or study on. And if I haven't accomplished that, if I haven't delivered something of value, I'll try my best to get better and better each time I address you. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your day. And you know what to do. Get to work. Stack harder. Ciao for now.
My name is Oliver Velez, and I am your 13%er Bitcoiner. Be safe out there, and until next time. Boom!